guys, Jared, Transformational Coaching, Action is Transformation. In this video, we're going to get into 5 unconventional relationship myths that I see that are pervasive throughout our culture and that really determine how our relationships function. I'm going to share with you first those 5 myths, and then I'm going to share with you the opposite and what we actually need to do as opposed to allowing those myths to rule our relationships and our thinking about relationship. So let's get into it. Recently, I've been reading the work of John Gottman, and John Gottman's really the authority on marriage and building sustainable, longevitous relationships. He's been studying this for over 4 decades, and he can tell just looking at the physiological signs and symptoms of people when they argue and tell whether they're going to have a relationship, a successful marriage or not. That's how much he's researched this. And he really shares with us in some of his books the myths around relationships that pervade throughout our culture. And these are myths that I believed, that I grew up into and thought that was how relationship had to be. And then I had relationships go south. And so I started looking for answers. So let's get into some of these myths. The first one is neurosis and personality problems ruin marriages. That's not necessarily true. A lot of the times we think that if we have this part of ourselves that we don't want to share with our spouse or the person we're in a relationship with, we have a lot of shame or guilt around it, and we don't want to share it with them because we're afraid if we do, then they won't accept that part of us, and then they might actually run away or not be with us because of that. So we hide it. I'll give you a perfect example. I remember I had one relationship with a woman years back, and she had a lot of daddy issues, and I had some other issues that I had to work through at that point. But her daddy issues, she was afraid to share with me that they were affecting our relationship. And I could see that they were affecting our relationship. So I would say, hey, I see this part affecting our relationship. Can we go into this a little bit more? And then she would try to cover it and hide it with shame and guilt because she was ashamed of it. And she was worried that it would ruin the relationship, which actually her trying to hide it eventually ruined the relationship. But really what I realized there, and from the research that John Gottman shares, is that those personal problems or challenges that we might have, we want to work through those with our partner. Neurosis or personality problems that we think that are affecting the relationship, we want to bring those to the relationship. And we want to work through them with our partner. If your partner is really worth being with, they're going to stick around. They're not going to run away. They're not going to say, oh, well, I don't like this part of you, so I don't want to work through this. Like, no, if you're willing to work through it with your partner and your partner's willing to work through it with you, that will actually strengthen the relationship. So open the conversation up to those things that you think drive your partner crazy, or those things that you're ashamed of. I was speaking with one couple last week, and they shared, and I'm not going to say what it was, but they shared with me the husband had this challenge that always affected the relationship in a bad way. But then I asked him, I said, well, is that really affecting the relationship, or is it your unwillingness to share it that's affecting the relationship? And he said, yeah, I don't want to share this with my wife because I'm afraid of what she'll think. And I said, that shame is the very thing that's keeping you from actually having a deep relationship. So then he shared that challenge that he had, that personal challenge, and she was a little bit upset at first. But then I asked her, I said, well, what are you upset about? And she said, well, I'm upset that if he doesn't work through this, then it's gonna keep us from being in a healthy relationship. I'm afraid that he's gonna find another woman. And once she realized that his challenge was an opportunity for them to come together and actually have a healthy relationship and work through it together and reinforce the strength of the relationship, she no longer got fearful or scared. And so then he felt comfortable going to her about the things that he was having, the challenges with. And so the very things that we think will destroy a relationship actually can create the relationship to be stronger. They can actually strengthen the bond between two people. So don't be afraid to Don't be afraid to share those parts of yourself that are ugly, the shadow aspects. Like, don't try to hide them from your partner. That's what a lot of us do, is we try to hide them because we're worried about that affecting the relationship. But the very act of hiding those things that we feel shameful about and want to hide from our partner, that's what actually creates the relationship disintegration. And I can remember in the relationship that I was in, this woman, I deeply loved her, but all these daddy issues she had, they were affecting our relationship, and she would try to hide it from me. And I told her, I remember thinking, I didn't have the emotional intelligence at the time. I wish I had, but if I had just been more open and said, look, we can work through this. You don't have to try to hide it from me. I can see that you're trying to hide it from me, and I understand there's some shame there, but if we work through this together, and I'm willing to work through this with you, then I think we could create, a stronger connection. But instead, she was worried that her daddy issues would affect the relationship, so she tried to hide it and said that she didn't have it. And then I felt that disconnect. I felt like she was lying to me, and then I didn't trust her, and then I was like, and then it was this downward spiral. So don't be afraid to share those challenges or those personal problems that you have. Open up to them. You'll actually create a stronger relationship with that person. Number 2, common interests keep us together. There's such a thing as social intimacy. Social intimacy is important. If you haven't seen my video on that, check out the video on all the different levels of intimacy: emotional, mental, physical, social, sexual. But if you're in a relationship and you think that spending time together with your partner is going to increase that relationship and make it better, that's not necessarily true. And here's why. What makes a relationship enjoyable is the quality of the time you spend together. And so if you don't have quality time together, then it doesn't matter what shared activities you're doing. For instance, if you're going to go to the beach and you're like, the beach or a long week's vacation is really going to help out our marriage. Well, if you're not having an enjoyable time with that other person and you're on vacation, it's not going to help the marriage or the relationship. So it really comes down to being open and honest about the quality of the engagement that you're having. If you focus on having a high quality relationship, then you'll see that you're going to increase your intimacy, you're going to increase your level of satisfaction, because it's the quality, not necessarily the quantity. You might spend a week with a person and not feel close to them at all and not increase your relationship at all, because if the quality of that time isn't good, then there's no point. So it's really about spending high quality time with that other person in that shared activity that's going to result in a healthier relationship, not simply just doing the same thing. At number 3, reciprocal actions. Gottman's research shows that all the relationships that were successful in terms of length and where people most enjoyed it, they had some sort of reciprocality going on a daily basis. It was like, I give you this and you give this to me. Now, it's not like keeping a tally like, did my partner do what I took out the trash this week? Is she going to take out the trash or do something else nice for me? It wasn't like that. That can be actually very unhealthy. But there's just this unconscious agreement where it says, hey, if you're doing this for me, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, and we'll go back and forth. That's a really healthy way to have a relationship. There's that flow of energy, that reciprocality. I give to you, you give to me, and it's healthy. So whenever we give without the expectation of receiving, most of the times that comes back to us, if depending on the person's value system. And if you're giving in a relationship and you're not receiving, then you might want to reevaluate that relationship and that person's value system, because they might just be a taker. So reciprocal actions are key here. The most successful relationships have some level of reciprocity. I give to you and you give back to me. Number 4, avoiding conflict will ruin your marriage. Remember, if you haven't seen my videos on conflict and how that can actually strengthen relationship, check that out. I made them pretty recently. They're on my channel. If you're avoiding conflict, that won't necessarily ruin your marriage. A lot of relationships, they just don't engage in further conflict. Like let's say you woke up on the wrong side of the bed and you're just really upset and you take it out on your partner. Well, that's you don't really necessarily need to go into it. If they just are having a bad day or a bad moment, you don't need to make it a bigger deal. Sometimes we just have these emotional fits like children where we get upset or we get hurt or we get angry and we act out. And if you can see that it's really not that important of an issue, they're just having an emotional fit, your partner's just having an emotional fit, you can just allow them to have that emotional fit and then just move on. Emotional fits are normal. Emotional fits it's a natural part of the being a human. There's going to be times where we're upset. There's going to be times where we're angry or where we're hurting. That's okay. If you have those times where you're upset, you're angry, or you're hurting, like that's just allow it to play out. You don't need to make a bigger deal of it. Sometimes we make bigger deals of things than they really need to be. Sometimes it's as simple as just, I didn't get enough sleep last night, or my partner or my mom or my dad didn't listen to me, or my brother's annoying me. Sometimes we don't even need to know why we're feeling bad. It's just that we're feeling bad and we're going to throw an emotional fit. And so when your partner tries to pick a fight or they're just upset or angry, just see it for what it is for. Oh, they're just having a little bit of upset thinking right now. Maybe they're a little bit insecure about something. We don't need to make a big deal out of it. I just need to get away. And in that moment, you can say, oh, I can see you're really hurting. I just want you to know I love you. If you need me, I'm here, but it looks like I need to give you some space. So I'm just going to give you some space, and I still love you. I'll come back when you're ready to reconnect. And it can be as simple as that. It doesn't have to be anything bigger. Sometimes we want to get caught up in like these deeper patterns of fighting or of it. We don't even need to go into it. You can just, they're really upset. They're angry right now. They're having an emotional fit. I'm just going to back off. I'm just going to give them their space. And if they need me there, then I'll be there. I'll be there for them. You don't need to go into it. So don't avoid conflict. People say avoiding conflict will ruin your marriage. And then some people say that, avoid conflict at all costs. You don't really need to go into it. There's this classic saying where, guys just say, whatever you want, my dear, or anything for you. And that's a really good example of it. It's just, okay, you know what? She's asking for this. I'm just going to give it to her. I don't need to go into it. It's not a big deal. It's not worth the conflict. And so there's some things that are worth fighting about and going deeper into. And then there's other things that's just, this person's having an emotional fit and I don't need to be around them right now. They're just having an emotional fit. It's that simple. So don't always be looking for a deeper reason of going into something. We don't need to avoid conflict. We don't need to go into it deeper. Sometimes there'll be times to go into it deeper if it's an enduring pattern. And if it's an enduring pattern, you should think, do I really want to be with this person? And then other times it's just as simple as, I don't need to go into this any deeper. Number 5, you don't have to fix the other person in order to have a happy relationship. A lot of the times we think that there's all these woundings, these inner child woundings, and all this other stuff that we need to correct or heal about ourselves. The reality of it is inner woundings, they're going to play out in our relationships, but that doesn't have to keep us from having a healthy, loving relationship. You can know when those woundings show up, and the best strategy that you can do is when that wounding shows up, just go into it. Just go into it right then and there and just see it for what it is and say, it seems like, hurt Amy or hurt Jessica is coming up right now. What does hurt Amy or Jessica need? You can humorize it. Sometimes when I'm doing this work, I'll have people project onto me, or someone will get upset, or, something will come up. And in that moment, I'll see their wounding and I'll humorize the wounding. I'll be like, it sounds like hurt Jessica is coming up. It sounds like Jessica, who is betrayed by, another male, is coming up. And you can humorize it to make it more palpable, to just, when we humorize those traumas, that can actually make things more easier. Not making it such a big deal. In therapy, there's this belief that everything has to be such a big deal, or we have to make this big deal about everything. And there's times where we do need to be sensitive to people's traumas based off of how big they are, or based off of how impactful they've been. But other times when that hurt wounding plays out, you can just see it for what it is for and humorize it and move on. It's that simple. I remember this was a relationship 3 years ago, and her wounding came up, and I saw the wounding for what it was. And I remember just saying, oh, it sounds like hurt Sarah's coming up. It sounds like hurt Sarah's coming up. And I was like, what does hurt Sarah need right now? What does she need to hear from me? And when I said that, she kind of like stood back and realized and saw that I was humorizing it, but that I still cared. And a lot of the times we think when we humorize a trauma that we don't care, we're not taking it seriously enough. But I just said, oh, it sounds like hurt Sarah's coming up. And I humorized it, and I was there for her as well, and I truly cared. But I just pointed out that, oh, you're just having an emotional fit right now, and that's perfectly okay. And so I did that, and it was no big deal. It was an issue. It was just like, oh yeah, I'm just having a moment. And so we have these emotional fits in relationships where worried parts of us or scared parts of us or all these different parts of us come up, and all we got to do is humorize it in that moment and still show our love and care. Don't humorize it and blow it off. Humorize it and let the person know that you care for them and you've seen what's coming up. But it's just a moment. They're just having an emotional fit. So you don't have to fix every other part of your partner before you can have a successful relationship. You can just see that part of them that's coming up, that wounded part of them, that hurt part of them, see it come up and just go into it. Oh, it looks like hurt Jessica's coming up. Or, oh, it looks like insecure Sam is coming up. What does insecure Sam need right now? How can I be there for insecure Sam? And when you work with your partner in that way, you'll move through everything quickly. You'll be able to get back to having an enjoyable relationship, and it's no harm, no foul. It's not nearly as a big deal as we make it out to be. That's all I got for this time. Thanks for joining me, you guys. If you found this valuable, please subscribe or share with any family or friends. I want this work to go out in the world. It helps people. It's helped me. Also, if you'd like to be part of live coaching, we'd love to have you. There's a link there below. You can sign up for live coaching with Laura and I. Also, Laura and I are doing this relationship series. So if you'd like to show up for the relationship series, we'd be more than delighted to have you be a part of it. We're doing interviews with relationship coaches. We're doing live coaching. And it's been a really enjoyable, fun time so far. That's all I have for this time. Thanks so much for joining me, you guys. Have a wonderful week. I will see you next time.